No Shame November, what I want to do is kind of briefly describe kind of where shame is coming from, the definition of shame, why we have such big shame triggers as women. But as I was researching kind of November and what I wanted to talk about and focus on this month was that November represents the spiritual warrior and acts as a mirror this month, reflecting that the battle always lies within itself. So I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people that I know, including myself, that when I'm running into myself or I'm having insecure thoughts, and it is a battle with self, whether it's a conflict of confidence, or I'm listening to what other people are thinking, or maybe adapting to what they're thinking. So I do like me some practical woo. I know that those of you that do know me, I say practical woo because it's kind of like this energetic feelings that we have within ourselves that we don't really pay attention to because life and society's kind of beaten that out of us or numbed it or made it kind of dull over time. And so what I'm really excited to cover today is that what you'll learn is a brief overview of shame, why women attach themselves unconsciously to shame more often than men, and how to overcome shame in today's world. So see how we go. So welcome if you're new, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're visiting us in the world. My name is Carolyn O'Neill. I'm a business mentor and mindset coach for first-time female entrepreneurs. I want to welcome you in. I don't know if many of you might have listened to or heard of Brene Brown. She's basically got a PhD in shame and guilt and vulnerability. She's an amazing author, writer, researcher. So I'm taking her definition because she's studied this over 30 years and actually has empirical data that reflects shame. So Brene's definition of shame is intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. So if you look at the definition that's kind of written in the dictionary, also Wikipedia, it's an unpleasant self-conscious emotion typically associated with a negative evaluation of the self, withdrawal motivations and feelings of distress, exposure, mistrust, powerlessness, and unworthiness. So there is a lot of charge behind this word shame. So my intention for No Shame November is to help educate you and also get you a better relationship with the word, and more importantly, a better relationship with yourself. Because once we kind of know a history of where shame kind of infiltrates our lives, we'll have a better understanding of how to fix it. And by fix it, I mean recalibrate, because really you can't fix a problem you don't think you have. And a lot of these shame triggers, unfortunately, have been kind of given to us throughout the centuries, if not the millennia. So when I was researching this, Brene Brown has a great way of looking at this, that she explains that shame, and if you use the metaphor of like a petri dish, shame only really needs three things to grow, and that's secrecy, silence, and judgment. And if you think about it, when we are feeling these intense feelings of unworthiness or don't have any motivation or feelings of distress or mistrust with ourselves, and we're not talking about it, we're not telling people about it, and we're judging ourselves because of those feelings, this is actually where shame will explode and bloom and blossom into more unworthiness. So the nice thing is that there is a solution. Shame cannot grow or thrive in the context of like a supportive environment. So if you think about empathy is really the emotion that I can relate and feel another person's kind of pain, but we don't necessarily do that for ourselves. Many times when we're in judgment of ourselves and we're feeling secret and silent about that judgment, we're embarrassed by it, so therefore we don't speak up and we don't also tell people and ask for help. It is important, however, that when we reach out for this supportive, empathic person, somebody who we trust, this person, and you might have known Brene Brown to say this, that they are playing in your arena. It does no justice to ourselves to advise others or have the advice of others if they are not playing in the same arena. So if you're the first time female founder, or maybe you're building a business, or maybe you've been building a business for the last year or two, and you don't have somebody that you can trust to have ideas bounced off of, or even the feelings, it's really hard to move past this secrecy, the silence, and this judgment of yourself if you're not expressing this out loud. We choose the people who have earned the right to hear our story. And here's the thing, we have a long lineage of history, right? And I'm going to emphasize his story. So women have been kind of muted and overlooked, underrepresented through the last 2,500 years of our history. If you think about it, how many times do you open up a book that you've read over the last decade that talks about a history of some sort, and there's rarely women involved? And if you think about rewinding that way, way back, so this is where I'm going to give you a bit of a history lesson, is that, you know, a history of shame has been blotted out of the details and relevancies over 2,500 years. And if you think about organized religion, and this is no beef on religion, I'm Irish Catholic, but I find it fascinating that what I've learned over the last several years is that there's not a lot of stories, or they're curated stories about women. And these stories kind of have built our societies in Western culture. So by not including the more general scope of women, it has actually kind of made ourselves as women not as relevant, not as important, not as effective, because we don't see our own history or her story within the context of the past. So, fun fact, I'm not sure if you know who Yahweh. Yahweh is basically the Hebrew and the Jewish context when they started, introducing all of religion. It predates the New Testament. Well, Yahweh actually had a wife, Asherah. There was a common blessing around the time of Solomon, blessing by the name of Yahweh and his Asherah. So there has always been, if you think about it, archaeological findings, for millennia before the New Testament, cultures and people have actually looked to the feminine and the masculine, the yin and the yang. There's been very much polarities in history. And if you think about it, if you go back to Greeks, so this is again predating all of the Western culture templates, his wife, Asherah, was written in the Greek word for wisdom, which is Sophia. So I want you to connect this dot, that before kind of Western civilization got on the scene, there was a very prominent female representation between like these gods, right? And Asherah, which in the Greek term was Sophia, and Sophia is the Greek word of wisdom. Here's the thing, ladies. Wisdom is something that is inherent in all of us, and we get to adapt and tune this wisdom versus the intellect that we've been trying to kind of force and contort ourselves in this Western civilization. So a lot of times intellect is something that is praised and has been for the last 2 millennia. Like, how can we have intellectual prowess? How can we have more? How can we push towards? And it's very masculine energy. Where you think of wisdom, where it's more wholehearted, it's loving, it's kind, it's joyous, it's experiential. So with this wisdom, with this Asherah, the wife of Yahweh, from dating back to Solomonic temple times, there was a representation of this feminine energy. Now, if you think about that, if that was brought up into our culture, and was that story that was told over and over again, do you think that there would be a difference in how we feel about ourselves as like important, as having relevancy, as having a sense of power, and really looking into this wisdom portion of ourselves? And so that's what I want to encourage you ladies to do, is really tap into that wisdom that a lot of times, because life gets lifey and it kind of beats it out of us, but our intuition, our wisdom is so incredibly important to tune into. So shame has also been a way to silence and control the masses throughout history, right? But what is the her story of the feminine energy with this wisdom. And as I've stated before, it goes back, predates 2,500 years of the New Testament. But along the line, because we needed to kind of contort and conform and control, different theologies have come about and sprung up to kind of silence women. So this is really like a her story that we have not had the option or choice to claim, yet because it's like a subconscious thing that we hear in our environment, we kind of take that on as our own. Now, how do we tune out the noise of what other people tell us to think, how to feel, and what we know about ourselves? And how can we as women reclaim our own thoughts of who we are and what is possible for our future? And the answer is discernment. Now, the difficulty in knowing the difference between messages from our history, our culture, and our societies, and the data that we have from other sources, this discrimination is really simple. It's a simple matter with the application of a basic rule. Learning how to tune into your highest thought, your clearest word, and your grandest feeling. So instead of like tuning into this intellectual wrestling match that we have, what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, in this binary context, it's super important to start thinking, like understanding your highest thought, your clearest word, and your grandest feeling. Because those things we don't argue with, right? Anything less from another source other than your higher self or your truest self is basically noise. So how do we tune into this higher self, this higher version of what we want to become in order to start a new business, change our life, make better decisions for ourselves? And here's the thing, if I want to break down, the highest thought is always that thought which contains joy. Now think about it. When you are excited about building a business, or if you're excited about taking a trip, like you can feel it literally in your body, right? Now, it's the highest thought because it brings you so much joy. But what happens when we start that thought process is that then our brain kicks in and thinks about all the things that we have to think about as far as like money, experience, acumen, all these things. But if we listen to our higher self and it brings us joy, right? What happens is our brain comes in and the intellect wants to negotiate us out of it. Now, the clearest word are those words which contain truth. Have you ever asked yourself like an honest question and you get like an immediate yes or no, but you can feel it like in your body? And then again, maybe you don't like that answer. Like, should I take this job? Should I take this trip? Should I date this person? A lot of times if we're listening to our gut or our intuition, we'll get an immediate yes or no. But sometimes we don't like that answer. So our brain kicks in and then we try to negotiate with that. I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've learned to tune this in very, very well. The clearest words are the words that contain truth. So we might not like the answer, but we know the truth. And the grandest feeling is that feeling we call love. So anyone who's experienced love or had kids or maybe a dog or a partner or a career that they love or experiencing the outdoors like me, that is something that I cannot even articulate because I can feel it. So if you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down, there's a very clear distinction between the head and the heart and what we want for ourselves. If we're looking for joy and we're seeking joy, truth and love, the embodiment of those feelings that put you on a path of your higher self, in my opinion, is that word stoked. So stoked really is the fuel that presents joy, truth, and love in your life. And these are how we can start making these distinctions. And again, it sounds a little wooey, but it works. This is the practice, right? This is the solution. You know, how confidence is built around who you are is how you can constantly practice this and start listening to yourselves more and less in the head. Because if you've ever had somebody tell you whether you're doing something right or wrong, but you know it in yourself to be true for you, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. But we get caught up because it's our cycle of this culture, it's a cycle of our history, to listen to what other people think. And frankly, what other people think of us is really none of our business, right? Trusting yourself more than the noise of others who aren't in the arena with you is like, we gotta just stop doing it, right? Like, learning to tune into ourselves and trusting ourselves and creating that truth, joy, and love within. Well, like, if you want a business strategy from like experiencing these things in your body, if you want a better life, it's how do you be truest to yourself, and everything else actually falls into place. And the strategy of life is really how to practice this in your life on like a daily basis. But you know what? This is some good stuff. So